Okay, thank you for joining. We're hoping to preview, review, do an introduction to the Moshe Emes series, Volume 3, Torah Discovery Chronology. Let's get the cover. Okay, Torah Discovery Chronology, Torah Testimony and Ancient Civilization Alignment. Here's another cover. We also known as Bible chronology. So on the picture here, volume 1, actually there's, section 1 of Torah Discovery Chronology began as Abraham until the Exodus. And then part 2 of this book, that's, in the book, whether it's called Bible Chronology, Torah Discovery Chronology, is Untying a Knot, is volume 2. And that gets in, Daniel, famous for untying a knot. So we try to untie the knot, which is the 52-year Persian span compared to the inflated fudge 208-year current consensus Persian span from the fall of Babel, the year after that Cyrus Declaration, until Alexander victory at Granicus, when Alexander begins to triumph. So anyway, I like this cover because it shows the history inscription, and we explain exactly, almost exactly, good enough, close enough, maybe exact, how that aligns with Torah, ancient civilization, Purim, and Holy Temple 2. There we see Darius I, who is Darius, the son of Histapes. And we actually know the two people behind him from the history books and from the Megillah, between them. And a lot of these people we know from the inscription. It doesn't show the entire inscription. There are 10, although they're not the 10 sons of Haman, interestingly enough. This is actually a little bit before Purim, just before, but depicts what happened shortly before Purim. We'll get into that, I hope, today. That he's to an inscription of Darius I. And of course, we have the cover of the relief from Egypt that's in the Leiden Museum of Joseph testing the brothers year 2 of the famine. And also has the son, and this depicts the 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, we find from our understanding, which applies more context than the circular consensus can, of what's going on here with the brothers tied up. Probably how many of the brothers have been Benjamin's there, so it could be 11. Joseph's back in Egypt. Shimon's already released. So so it should be 11 of the brothers, this depiction here, if it shows all of them. Year 2 of the famine, which is right before we come down, and 210 years before the Exodus. Joseph, year 9 of his elevation, 7 years. Plenty soon after he's elevated began. First year famine, we come down. Shimon is taken hostage. We come back. Second year, we come. We prostrate us bring back Benjamin. and Shimon's released, and then we're tested again, and we passed with flying colors. We could have just let Benjamin be taken. We could have gone home to our families, but no, we, every one of us went back to stick by and have our fate with Benjamin, little brother of our little brother and Joseph's little brother. Okay. Now, dedications. Just had Shavuos yesterday. Now I'm going to get out my calendar from Chabad of Bakersfield. And here we are. Here's Shavuos. Okay, Thursday night, Friday night, and Shabbos day. Now we're on the first day of the week, and it should be the 31st today, May 31st, 2020. So, which is the 8th day of Sivan. Shavuos falls on the 6th day of Sivan, and outside of Israel, the extra day, 7th day of Sivan. And so today is the 8th day of Sivan, the 3rd month. Okay, let's dedicate this to the people we prayed for on Yizkor, family members. They should have an Elias Neshama in merit of our Torah study today. And for those who don't do Yizkor, the righteous Gentiles with us, or Jews who haven't learned how to do it yet, or have nobody to say Yizkor for yet, thank God. Don't have any close relatives that have passed on, parents, siblings, children, brother or sister. So yeah, let's say it for our grandparents or our great-grandparents, as far back as you want to go. And okay, so yeah, last week when I was talking about Volume 2, Distant Starlight in Torah, which basically falsifies based on the overwhelming amount of empirical evidence that is a cosmological redshift of distant starlight, falsifying all deep time-dependent scientific hypotheses and assumptions. I was naming the months, Nisan, our first month, starting the Exodus year. ER, the second month, and it just had ended. And it was beginning our third month, was Rosh Chodesh last week on Sunday. Sivan, I said ER, just because I'm absent-minded often. And you know how sometimes in January you might be writing a check, and you know a lot of people aren't like that, but people like me, a lot of times will start writing what we're conditioned to write. So I was writing, how you write off the year that just expired, you start writing out that year, and then realize, but you know it's the next year if you think about it for a second. So after I listened to the program, I quickly realized I had misspoken, that I said Iyab, I meant Sivan. So look after the program today, and what I'll try to do after I listen to the programs, any obvious errors. I'm not the greatest detail person, so a lot of times it takes me a while. A lot of times it's easier to catch other people's errors than your own, because you assume a lot of times you're talking and you assume everybody knows what you're talking about. So just because I don't articulate a point or make my case in the video, look at the book. If I don't make the point in the book after you read it and considered it, please email me so I can clarify my point. Or maybe if I made an error, I'd like to go back and either correct it or explain to you I didn't make an error, or possibly go back to the drawing board if you think you can falsify any of my in my scientific model hypotheses or assertions. If you think you can show why yours is a higher probability, you may have a higher probability that maybe not, that first of all, it just might be a competing hypothesis, or you might actually, hopefully, be nice if you can try to falsify my work, because I'm pretty sure it's so far stood up well to some pretty intense scrutiny. And that's with that type of stress is how we grow. And so far, Torah stood the test of time. My limited understanding, only Hashem has 100% perspective. So anyway, let's dedicate it to them. We also want to dedicate it to people who don't abuse power. There's been some events recently where we saw, for whatever reason, some abuse of power. A lot of it was by the protesters, a lot of abuse of power. The mob abusing their power to take what wasn't theirs. They were just as guilty of the same thing, projecting their flaws onto the person who abused his power. The tragic death of a person who is already subdued and should have been, Hashem would judge. Hashem has the 100% perspective, but two wrongs don't make a right. And let's be the students of Abraham, loving peace, and of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace, and being strong enough and confident enough that we don't panic and feel like we have to kill somebody just because we don't know what they're up to. But if somebody's trying to kill us, we do have to, they may not stop at us. If they're trying to murder us, they might murder other people. So we want to, the sooner we nip that in the bud, the better. But again, it's much better, we should have enough trust in Hashem. Normally, it's a lot of time not for us to make that decision if we don't need to. So let's trust Hashem. Hashem's going to judge everybody fairly, and a lot of people are going to end up in hell shame if they try to obstruct the restoration of Jewish Israel. It's pretty well known that if you're obstructing a Jew from keeping the Torah, or even a Gentile from keeping the 7 Noahide laws, you not only hate that person by keeping them from living up to their potential, but you hate Hashem, who's in the covenant with that person. Everybody is created b'Tselem Elokim, in the image of Hashem, and we should respect that person. And what will lead to peace is acknowledging the forefather. It's not for us to decide what denomination people want to hold. If you're a Jew, you should know that if your mother's Jewish, or your once you convert to Judaism, a halakha conversion, you don't go down in kedusha, so you can be more careful on yourself, but you don't go back. We don't Amorit in kedusha. The covenants make us, sanctify us, and it's not up to us to cut back. Once we're in the covenant, we can't cut back. We're in the covenant 6:13. People who obstruct other people from keeping their respective covenants not only hate that person, but they hate Hashem, the one upon whom all depends. So think twice, because you'll be judged the way you judge others, the way you treat others. You project your flaws. If somebody projects their flaws onto others, which seems very common in the thank God it's become known, some of these glaring examples of projection in the media, mainstream media. Though the golden rule of justice would be, they're asking to be judged that way. When you treat others a certain way, you're asking to be judged that way. So try to be merciful to others, try to chastise others in a loving way, in a way that will not drive them further away into self-destructive behavior, but in a way that will help them overcome their self-destructive addictions. We'll have our tests, but if we try really hard, the more times we mess up, the more desensitized we become. So try to repent early and often before it gets too difficult that you can't even see the path to repentance and overcoming any negative addiction. Okay, let's get back to Torah discovery chronology. Now, I mentioned before, all deep time-dependent scientific hypotheses have, for all intents and purposes, for laws of probability, been falsified. And if you think that the dinos got wiped out by the asteroid was 66 million years ago, and if you think the ice age is set in maybe millions of years ago, 25 million, it's a figure I like to use, but it could have been, so it doesn't really matter whether you say 2 million years ago or 64 million years ago. It doesn't matter because it's wrong. It's inflated, and you're setting yourself up for failure if you want to understand the one historic actuality. So if you think the ice ages ended 10,000 years ago, or 11,000, 12,000 years ago, again, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're not gonna, may get bits and pieces, you might get relative dating. A lot of times you don't even get that if you follow the consensus on some things. So what we want to do is have an internally consistent model that aligns with all the facts. We have that, based on Chazal, 5,780 years to date. The current consensus certainly does not have that. They mess up. They contradict science. They contradict Torah testimony. I consider it a type of avodah zarah to hold by it because we know better now. We have to, if you haven't figured it out already, in a different way, we figured it out in the Moshe Emes series. So you've been, you're on notice that you should know better and do not rely on current consensus, inflated science, deep time dependent science, and don't rely on consensus ancient civilization dating. It's also wrong. If you want, you can say, I don't know, I don't know if this guy knows what he's talking about. I want to rely, my teacher told me you can use a consensus, Egypt was founded 1,400 years prior to, what we learned from Chazal, where it was founded 7 years after Hebron. Although Rashi said, not necessarily, but about that time. It certainly wasn't founded before Mitzrayim was born. It certainly wasn't founded before the flood of Noah, which was 4,124 years ago. So, in fact, it was, we hold it was founded right after the passing of Noah, within a year or two of the passing of Father Noah in 2006 on a Monday. So, about 1,400 years, about one Sothic cycle, 1,460 years. I don't think they have it, that exact, but Egypt was founded, now it's 5,780. Subtract 2006 from that, and you get about 3,774 years ago. So within about a year or two of that. So if you're going to start the dating of Egypt 1,400 years before that, you're not going to get everything right. You might get bits and pieces, but you're not going to understand the historic benchmarks or the historic evidence in context, info context, and you have gaps. Torah, we don't really have any gaps. We go all the way back to before time began, before day one, and we have this gets into the first book, Gruesome and Complex Creation Framework, the Moshe Emes series framework for understanding Torah and science. So we don't really have any gaps. The universe didn't begin 13.8 billion years ago. It began 5,780, maybe 81 by now, depending. We start year one from Adam on day 6, literal day 6. The breakup of the original single continents didn't happen until after the beginning of the flood of Noah. So you have about 200 million years, give or take, of history in a very short period of time. Heat, time, and pressure, 3 variables. Asteroid impacts, 2 impacts. Energy transference, break up the continents. Cause and effect of the setting into the ice ages that began. Set in cause and effect due to the multiple impacts here. Dinos were not on the passenger list. Have things that breeds of dinos that had lost the curse, walking its belly, so loss of information. Some breeds of species maybe of dinos, Taninum Gedolim 5, had adapted, lost information, and were able to survive in the water. If any were taken the ark, it could have been as pets or as extras, but day 5, Taninum Gedolim, it's day 5, specified birds, kind of fish, but not Taninum Gedolim. So it talks in the Talmud about why they were not taken on, and I think Tractate Shabbos. Oh, okay, so I was talking about the calendar. So anyway, yeah, you don't want to do, you don't want to be somebody who does foreign worship. It's one thing to, respect your secular teacher or your parent if they were indoctrinated with deep time dependent doctrine, or even your rabbi. Hopefully you have a rabbi who understands, Torah testimony, Hashem alone had 100% perspective, and well, I didn't figure it out. When he taught you, hadn't figured it out yet. Maybe now he read the Moshe Emes series and understands, and so he knows. But a lot of people, or a lot of professors, they simply don't know. You can go to the top university, have a bunch of PhDs, and you just learned one school of thought. You might be expert in that school of thought. You just never considered and never studied the other school of thought. If you had, you'd be advocating what I'm advocating. It's just such easy, it's hard to believe anybody could be, unless they're very arrogant or a liar, or just want to live in denial, or just so indoctrinated in confirmation bias. Yeah, it's not popular science yet, but if you don't know where to look, contact me, and or first read the Moshe Emes series. So you can respect them. So if you're honest, or you're an honest scientist, and you've never learned the other school of thought, and you've probably spent 10 years or 6 years, at least 4 or 6 years if you have your PhD, learning one side of the dispute. You're a historian. We're talking about history today. You've been immersed for many years. You have your PhD in ancient civilization, or in, got your PhD studying 100 years ago, you got your PhD studying Piltdown, man hoax, the orangutan human, mashup, a fudge and paste dino bird from, which is a cut and paste National Geographic. Maybe somebody got their PhD on that and didn't realize it was a hoax. But you've been immersed in one school of thought, so try to have an open mind. And if you're honest, you'll say you don't know because you haven't studied, you haven't passed tests in the creation science models the best we have. Whereas creation scientists, and I, at least I have a Bachelor of Science, and I pretty good relative value and have a degree in accounting. So been around numbers and evaluating things for over probably about 30, 40 years. So I kind of know what adds up. And if you look at the big picture, creation, we have a model that's internally consistent that adds up, and you don't. Okay, if you still believe in the universe is billions of years old and the earth is billions of years old, or that the ice age has ended, setting, or if the asteroid impact that wiped out the dinosaurs was 66 million years ago, you really don't have an internally consistent model that aligns with the records that we have, including Torah testimony and with science like carbon dating. Okay. So there's a general principle. A lot of times, I don't think always, but at least sometimes, we'll begin counting something at the beginning of when it's happening, not from when it ends. So we start, an event begins at the beginning of the event, sometimes. So I wrote down a few examples. Okay, Temple 2, Holy Temple 1 started 480 years after the Exodus with King Solomon. Now, 480 years, 2,448, they want to make a note of that. 400 years after the birth of Isaac, the son of Abraham. And who was born when Abraham was 100. So Abraham, 1948 birth, 52 years before the year 2000, 48 years before the 1996 dispersion from Babel. So 1948, Abraham was born when his father was 70. We get into that, how we know it was 70 when Abraham was born and not his older brother or younger brother. Have to look in the book. We kind of figured that out, who's older. Like Shane, he might be listed first, even though he was not oldest. We know that, right? So even if Abraham was not oldest, he could have been listed first. So when his father was 70. 1948 plus 100 to the birth of Yitzhak plus 400, 2,448. 480 years after that, King Solomon, year 4, begins Holy Temple 1. If I remember right, it's about 4 years of construction. Could have been 7, but I kind of remember 4, but whatever it was. The 410-year span, that's very common, is from the beginning of King Solomon's construction. Okay, so that's one example where we're at the beginning of the construction, we're not at the dedication, whether it was 4 or 7 years later. Which is explicit, it's not like we don't know, I just don't have that great a memory. Look at Legacy of Sinai. Here are some good books that I like to, Miraculous Journey by Rabbi Eisen, and my favorite, Legacy of Sinai by Rabbi Zechariah Fendel. Yeshiva Staten Island used to have this as a fundraiser, shouting the Masara based on Legacy of Sinai by Rabbi Zechariah Fendel. Great, easy reference book. Okay, so 480 years after the Exodus, King Solomon begins building Holy Temple 1. It lasts for 410 years. So that's 2,448 plus 480, 2,928 plus 410 is 3,338. That was when the Holy Temple was destroyed. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, his year 19 was 3,338. But he came 18 years prior in his second year, and he conquest of Judea, and that's where we count the 70 years, when the prophecy, I believe, of Jeremiah, or there's some prophecy that we knew it was going to be 70 years from what we call Galus Bavel, Babylonian exile. Now, did that 70 years begin at the destruction of the temple? And if you hold by 3408 was the beginning of dedication. I think beginning, yeah, if you hold that was the beginning of Holy Temple 2, you know, you probably say, okay, yes, so 70 years from Nebuchadnezzar year 2 until Cyrus' proclamation. And then 18 years after both of those, 18 years after 3,320 Nebuchadnezzar year 2, we get to the destruction. And 18 years after Cyrus' proclamation, we get to Darius the Persian year 2. Now, we're going to see that in here we show exactly why Darius the Persian is not Artaxerxes, Darius Artaxerxes, the son of Esther and Xerxes, but it's actually his grandfather. Darius the Persian is Darius I, Ben Histapes the Persian. But anyway, the point here we're trying to say is right now, the beginning of an event is often when we begin counting. So 70 years from Nebuchadnezzar year 2 is the 70-year Galus Bavel. And it ends with Cyrus' proclamation, 3,320, 18 years before the destruction of Holy Temple 2, plus 18 to the destruction, plus 52, 18 plus 52. 70 years after is Cyrus' proclamation, 3,390, when Cyrus becomes king of Bavel and even king of Media. He had been married, his wife died during the year of the fall of Babel, with, you know, Belshazzar handwriting on the wall. His mother told him, or grandmother told him, better get Daniel. Daniel comes, so that very night was the fall of Babel. You also identify Daniel in the history books under some names that are not that obvious. And okay, don't want to get too sidetracked. We're trying to get to the point about the beginning of the matter is often when we start a count. So that was one example, the beginning of Holy Temple 1. Second example, the beginning of the occupation of Judea by Nebuchadnezzar began the 70-year Galus Bavel, Babylonian exile. Okay, here's an important one. Alexander, the Macedonian, his initial triumph over Persia, his initial victory over Persia was by the river Granicus, which was about 6 or 7 years before we begin what we call Minyan Shtarat, document year count, which is synonymous with the Seleucid era. And the consensus has what we call, you could say, no, they have the Seleucid era right. They just started about 16 years later than it really began. They have it, instead of having it starting 6 or 7 years after the victory of River Granicus, they begin it the 6 or 7 years plus 16, and we'll hopefully get a chance to, if not in the book, we explain where they make their mistakes. So we call that the Seleucid era, error, E-R-R-O-R, in the Seleucid era. But when they begin it, but actually the before BCE, before Christian era, they actually have that. That's where we kind of get in alignment. That begins at the end of Philadelphians 2, the beginning of Philadelphians 3. That's where that 16 years of fudge, last bit of fudge that started at 13.8 billion inflated consensus timeline and worked its way down to about 208 minus 52 by the Persian era. So about 100, what's 208 minus 52 is 156 by the Persian era, inflated by, and then gets down to about 16 years after the Persian era. And that is at the tail end of Philadelphia's 2 that gets reconciled and resolved. Okay, so that's the third example. Beginning of Holy Temple 1, 4 years, during the, begin by the start, to by Nebuchadnezzar, to initial occupation of Judea, 18 years before the destruction of Holy Temple 1, and 3, Alexander. We're going to start what we call the Greek span, 180-year Greek span. We're going to start that at 3,442 by Alexander's initial victory over Persia, even though Darius, I actually hold that's Artaxerxes, Darius, the son of Esther, and Xerxes, the grandson of Darius I from the Behistun inscription, because Darius I's son was Xerxes, and Xerxes, who's Ahasuerus, we'll find out, and a lot of people hold that, but they, they get bits and pieces. And so Darius of Artaxerxes was the one who, not long after the river Granicus, by Isis, flees from Alexander, and he dies probably about a couple years after that. He's killed, murdered. Okay. So, yeah, something came up recently. I was reading about the, so how many days, we were counting the Omer. We finished counting Omer, 49 days, starting the, right with the 50th day, would be Shavuos. So the 50th day is Shavuos, and we begin one day after Passover, after we go. Yom Tov is a type of Shabbos. Like Shabbos is every day, every week. We call it Shabbos, Shabboson. There are 39, 40 minus 1 major categories of Malacha, of creative type acts associated with the tabernacle that we refrain from on Sabbath, on this weekly Sabbath, the 7th day of the week, to commemorate the universe being created in 7 days. 7th day Hashem rested on day 7. So that's called Shabbos Shabboson, Sabbath of Sabbaths, and cessation of. And then Yom Kippur is also considered Shabbos Shabboson, but the other Yom Tovs, even if they fall during the week, they're called the Sabbath, the Shabbos, because why? We cessate for almost 40 minus 1, but we're allowed to cook, heat up food, increase a flame, lower flame, to do cooking, and carrying from a public domain to a private domain, which we normally don't do on Sabbath, because that was one of the things we didn't, again, acts that associated with the tabernacle. That's a different topic, and there are a ton of rabbis and Torah students who know more about Shabbos laws, and halacha, and those details. So I focus on this because not that many people focus on it. So I thought where I can make my main contribution. Okay, so far I've asserted, and I think I back it up in the books, that the consensus is inflated. It stops 13.8 billion inflated. The Earth was here by the end of day 3. The original single continent was in place 5,780 years ago, a few days before that, and we're in that year now. about. We're in month 10. We're in Sivan, and it's about 10 months after, 9 or 10 months after. Month 7 is Nisan, ER8. Sivan, 9 months after Tishrei. Tishrei is when Adam was created in full stature on literal day 6. So, okay, so the Earth is not 5 or 6 billion years, 4 or 5 rounded billion years old. It's just over 5,780 plus 9 months. We can start year 1, not year 0 count by Adam, and then a few days because on day 3, and again in volume 2, we have the hypothesis on the initial cause and effect science behind the formation of the original single continent. That was in place until the Marble year, the asteroid impacts during the Marble year that got the plate tectonics going and left us with the Ice Age, which spanned about 340 years to the dispersion from, beginning of the dispersion from Babel. So if you go back to Passover, this is not in the book. It's in the Torah book, the Chumash, 5 books of Moses. Okay, Passover. Passover this year was Wednesday night and Thursday. So we call that Yom Chamishi, the 5th day of the week. First day of the week, Saturday night and Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday night and Thursday are Yom Chamishi, 5th day of the week. Now, it happened to be the year of the Exodus, according to tradition. It was lined up the same way. We had the 10th day of Nisan, Yud Nisan, my son Akiva Yitzhak's birthday, and also the anniversary of our crossing the Jordan under Joshua. There's also 10th of Nisan and a Shabbos, so the same alignment as Passover in Egypt, Passover year in Egypt. So 10th of Nisan on a Sabbath, that's pretty well known, which means that Passover on Yom Chamishi, the 5th day of the week, is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Passover is on the 15th. 14, birthday of David Binyamin, Erev Pesach. So that night at midnight, take the Korban Pesach, which we tied up on the 10th in the original Passover in Egypt, our original month 1, so it's 10 days after the Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Okay, so 10th day, 15th day. Okay, now we would start counting. So once we got the mitzvah counting the Omer, I don't think we counted that original year, but once we got the mitzvah counting the Omer annually from the wave offering, and then we count 50 days until 7 complete weeks, and then 50th day would be become Shavuos. So this would be first day in the Omer, which would mean that would become the 8th day in the Omer. So 7, 8. So again, +1. So 8 plus 15 for 2 weeks +1. So that would be 14, 15, 21, 22, etc. Go through the month of ER. Okay, so here we are, Lag BaOmer, 33rd day in the Omer. Okay, so here we should be a multiple 7, should be 42, 48. Is that right? No, over here we were. Thursday. Stop counting the Omer. Okay, I think I have to go back to Nisan. I made a mistake. Okay, back to April this past year. Okay, so we started, actually, first day of Passover here. Okay. So, oh yeah, it's kind of confusing because I'm looking at the mirror image of the calendar. So, first day of Passover, Wednesday night and Thursday. That means Thursday night and Friday. So Friday day would be 1 in the Omer. That means 0, 7. So 1, so 7 plus 1, 8, 15. So Thursdays would be a multiple of 7. 7, 14, 21. 28, 35, 42, 49. Okay, so that meant that I guess on Wednesday night and Thursday was 29. So yeah, so the 50th day would be the first day of Shavuos, light candles for Yom Tov, and light candles for Yom Tov. And on Thursday night and Friday, that would be the 50th day. Now, there's a tradition that Matan Torah was on Shabbos, which means Friday night and Shabbos. So what happened? So now we have a fixed calendar, and we have, I think, a 29-day and a 30-day between Nisan and Iyar. So that the 50th day is supposed to be Shavuos, based on the grain, the counting of the weeks, which is fine. Now, that first year in the wilderness, in leaving Egypt, I believe we had a 30-day Nisan and a 30-day Iyar, because if Shavuos was, if it was on the 6th day of Sivan, this is the 6th day of Sivan, but if Shabbos was the 6th day of Sivan, that meant we had a 30-day Nisan and a 30-day Iyar, which is very possible because we would do a manual counting of the declaration with witnesses of the new moon and declare the new moon. God left that up to us to decide whether it's going to be a 29 or 30 day based on the witnesses. If they saw the new moon, we'd have to, okay. So that's a subject in itself. There are several good books that I referenced, I believe, last week. Rabbi David Feinstein, Jewish Calendar, Rabbi Bushwick, Understanding the Jewish Calendar, Rabbi David Bleich, and others, but those are some good ones on Understanding the Jewish Calendar. Okay, so now we have the fixed calendar. So, but most of the time, it's probably going to be the 6th of Sivan is probably going to be Thursday night and Friday. But that year, now it could be we were coming from the west side of Mount Sinai, so we didn't see the new moon. We were coming on the came to Sinai about, I think it's explicit, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Now that could also be that evening. We could have been traveling at evening. Could have had an obstructed view of the western horizon. So maybe we're coming from the east. Or maybe we're coming around from the eastern side, or there are mountains obstructing, so you wouldn't see the new moon on the horizon, on the western horizon the way we normally can, if you have an unobstructed view and there are no clouds up. So that would mean that for Passover, if the first day of Passover is day 1, but we don't count the Omer to day 2 is day 1, but so including day 1 plus the 7 weeks of counting the Omer, there's 50 days. And then normally the 6th day of Sivan, if it's a 29 and 30 day lunar month, that adds up to 51. But if Passover was Thursday, Wednesday night and Thursday, and that would be true if we took the korban and tied up the Passover offering on the 10th of Nisan on Shabbos. And if Matan Torah was on Shabbos, and if that was the 6th day of Sivan, then that would be 52 days. It just means 2 30-day lunar months that particular year. And but in the future, Hashem probably knew that it's only going to be a 29 and 30-day month. So we're going to have this year, outside of Israel, we're covered because we have 2-day Yom Tov. So the Shabbos, which was the 7th of Sivan, was the 52nd day, including starting from the first day of Passover, which is one day before the counting of the. Now it could be that Moses, when we got to Mount Sinai, Moses went up, came back down. He had to separate for 3 days. I think on the 3rd day, which is probably 6th day of Sivan, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So now let's say that was could be that we actually started counting from the 5th. Maybe something was happening on the 5th day of Sivan already, which would have been the 51st day from the first day of Passover. So anyway, I haven't looked into it too much. Maybe somebody's already looked into it and knows. But that could be a case of start at the beginning. Something was happening with the giving of the Torah. God gave us the first 2 directly. Then we asked Moshe, to be the intermediary for the other, and the other 8, I believe Hashem gave us through Moses. Now, so another reason we know that Shavuos probably could not have been past the 6th is we know that Moses was up for 40 days. And we also have a tradition, Moses came down on the 17th of Tammuz. Moses broke the tablets when he saw the golden calf, and there are 3,000, apparently 3,000 here, and we're deeply involved in that, were killed. Okay. This year it's going to be the 9th, 17th of Tammuz, fast this night, and here we have the fast of 17th of Tammuz, which begins a 3-week period. So there are 5 things that happened at on the fast day, the 17th of Tammuz, and 5 things that happened on the 9th of Tammuz. We call those the 3 weeks. Okay. And if you count, if the 6th day of Sivan, I believe when we got the 10 Commandments, maybe Friday night, maybe started Friday afternoon into Friday night, and maybe started Friday night, maybe Shabbos day. I'd have to double check and see whether it was daytime or it could have been in the evening. I think it might say. So how many more days do you have in the month of Sivan? Let's say it's a 29-day month. 29 minus 6 is 23. Okay, so if you start 7, 8, 9, just count. So, maybe if Moses went back up on the 7th or late on the 6th of Sivan, you have about 23 days. And then you have the 17th day of Tammuz, the month after Sivan. So 23 and 17 add up to 40. So was Moses up there for complete 40? Or was he up were 1 or 2 of the days partial? Probably somebody knows it. Probably could figure it out. But that's how we know there are about 40 days. So we know that the Aseret Dibra could not have been that. So at the latest, it could have been 7th of Sivan. I don't even know if it could have been that late, but probably had to be 6th of Sivan in order for Moses to go up for 40 days. People knew he was supposed to be up there for 40 days. Some people started to feel insecure. They thought he was dead. They might have had good reason to think that. It may have been a test. But that's by the way, that's a classic case where time is used to test us, and where a lot of people fail the test. So the 40 days, if we knew that there were going to be 40 days, and I think we kind of knew Moses was supposed to be up there for 40 days, I'm not sure, but I kind of remember that maybe we knew. And then we didn't come down at the appointed time. People who were insecure, or people who didn't trust Hashem enough, started to panic. And the result was a golden calf. And, hopefully we've already paid our final installment on that. The people I think who were actively involved, I think they may have gotten, those may have been the people who were killed back then, but the people who could have stopped it. So we should try not to be, should speak out. So if we see an error in time, so if people don't trust Hashem enough to have given us the right time in the Chumash, the spans, in a way they're making the same mistake as the people who panicked and decided to go with the secular consensus, Hellenized consensus, and to discount Torah testimony and Chazal. So they're pretty much making, repeating the mistake of those who lack confidence and went along or tolerated the golden calf. So let's not make the same mistakes. Look at the introduction to the Moshe Emes series, where the dedications are. You also show how the Nachash, the Tanin dinosaur, legs underneath the dinosaur, Tanin, in the tree, and river monitors, even adults can climb trees. I didn't even know that. I knew that giant monitor juveniles could tree perch, but I saw that river monitor, which is second to the giant monitors, climbing up a tree, coconut tree, the other day on a nature shot. So dinosaurs, if you think they lived millions of years ago, you're as naive and ignorant as Eve was. It wasn't her fault. They learn, we learn from our mistakes, and now when we put a fence around the Torah, we're careful to disclose, don't eat from the tree and let's not touch it, is a rabbinic fence, which is, so they made that mistake, but Eve was ignorant, or she would have learned, and that they would have learned Torah properly, she probably would not have fallen for that test. So let's not fall for this test, because you don't have to need to be ignorant if you think, and it is ignorant to think that dinosaurs lived and died out millions of years ago. Okay. So what do you need me for, aside to tell you that the consensus is inflated and Hellenized version by the Persian period, inflated and fudged? Because Chazal, there's a lot of Chazal, and if you don't have enough context, you can make a few errors and omissions if you haven't thought through all the Chazal. So volume 1, my first book, the recent complex creation, then the recent complex creation framework for understanding science became 6 principles. I just try and show how the alignment of Torah and science to, so people can retain their faith in Hashem, and like Rav Hirsch said, be knowledge-based about it. Know how to answer Nafikaris. They're heretics, and you don't, some smart-ass, teachers telling your kid is, the Bible is just a storybook by some sheep herders, uneducated sheep herders, whatever. He's projecting his own ignorance. Of it, we're far more educated and knowledgeable in what was really happening, and even a 3rd grader or 3-year-old in many cases, Torah Cheda student knows more than the top college professor who tries to who says, "Oh no, it's impossible. The Bible is not MS." But still, I found there are some issues that Chazal are well aware of that had not been reconciled. So in Avram to the Exodus, one of the issues that I took on to try to consider, Baruch Hashem, I think I did, was blessed with being the conduit for revealing the Torah, is the Bris Ben Abasarim was not when some Chazal assume Abraham was 70 years old, which brings up some issues, and a lot of people are aware of that. But when Abraham was 85, now it turns out Chazal, there's a Chazal that 84 is just turning 85. Bereshis Rabbah, Midrash Rabbah, Bereshis Rabbah, they call it in Midrash Rabbah, has Abraham 85. But it doesn't get into it too much, what was going on. So in Abraham to the Exodus, we get into that. And so we're talking about the beginning of a thing. We often start counting from the beginning. So as it turns out that while Abraham was not 70, in the year 1948 plus 70 is 2018 on a Monday. Start year one by the formation of Adam and full stature. Abraham was not 70 at the Bris Ben Abasarim, but the catalyst for the Bris Ben Abasarim was when Abraham was 70. The catalyst for the Bris Ben Abasarim. The Bris Ben Abasarim itself was when Abraham was just turning 85, possibly 84, but probably just turning 85. But the catalyst was 14, 15 years earlier, when Abraham was 70 in the year 2018 on a Monday. Okay, now what happened in 2018? Okay, so if we recall, Abraham was born in 1948. The start of the dispersion from Babel, 1996, when Abraham was 48. Now, what caused and effect? I think I mentioned a week or two ago. So I thought lead poisoning, but it could be mercury poisoning. It had some mercury in there too that Hashem used to confuse the languages. I think Aver was probably not, Shem and Aver are probably not involved in and we know Abraham was not involved in the construction of the Migdal Babel, so he would not have been exposed to all that mercury and lead and was able to keep the original. Remember, we talked about the origins of the speeches with Isaac Moses, and check out edenics.org, the original single language, and Avram HaIvri from Ivrit, also from across the river, but Aver Hayadin, and Aver probably Euphrates or Tigris and Euphrates. Not Aram Naharayim, some Armenian the other day, it's Aram Naharayim, it's where maybe the Armenians are from Lavan, the family, cousins there. So anyway, but Ivrit, Aver, and we know that Avram studied for 20 years with Noah, and Yitzhak studied with the Academy of Shem and Aver. Yaakov, I think he was with Shem. I'd have to check out the chronology, but at least with the Academy of Shem and Aver, even if Shem had already passed. But by the time Yaakov spent on his way up to Haran, to Turkey, between the rivers, the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, up where Turkey is now, spent time, I think 14 years, if I remember, 13, 14 years, Jacob studied Torah there in the Academy of Aver outside of Jerusalem. And they've actually found, I think, remnants of where that city of Shem and Aver, and they found all different kinds of seeds and stuff, beans, and they were doing probably genetic research, breeding, and cattle breeding and stuff. So that might be where Yaakov learned how to do about epigenetics, which goes, past what Mendel never, figured out. So, it's trying to catch up to what Shem, Aver, and Yaakov in biology and genetics was trying to catch up to what they knew. So, okay, so it was 430 years. So even though it's tough to read into the words, it repeats it. I think it's repetitive, and I think it comes to teach us not that we were in Egypt. We know we were in Egypt 210 years. Yaakov Radu went down. And 400 years from the birth of Isaac, because Isaac would be, your children would be for 400 years. I think it says that, yeah, Bris ben Abisar 400 years, so 400 years from the birth of Isaac. And it's kind of treated like a stranger. At the Bris ben Abisar, it doesn't say you're going to be 400 years in Egypt, it says in a strange land. And Isaac was probably treated like a stranger. Remember down in Gaza, which is, Isaac never left Israel, the Holy Land, and Isaac lived in Gaza. So logically, everybody knows that Gaza is part of Israel, the land of Abraham. So remember the wells, and he dug up the wells of Abraham, and I think again the Philistine, occupants who came from, I think grandson of Plishti was the grandson of Mitzrayim, if I recall, and Kaftarim, I think, came from maybe Cyprus, from the by where Greece is now. Came and joined their cousins, the Philistines. So treated like a stranger even in our own land. And we're still treated like strangers in our own land by the United Nations and the European Union. They really shouldn't be doing that, because they'd be in for a rude awakening when they realize that they projected their own flaws onto us, and they're acting in defiance of Hashem, who'll be their judge. And the go to real justice is they shouldn't be treating us unless they want to be, this way, unless they want to be treated that way. They'll be pretty humiliated, shamed, and whatever suffering we've endured because of their false accusations and misinformation and obstruction, they'll have asked for that. So, like I said, repent early and often. Okay. And don't follow a majority to evil. Okay, so 430 years. So what happened when Avram was 70? Lech Lecha, Avram was 75, 2,223. 1948 plus 75, 2,223. Lech Lecha, go for you to the land of Israel. Could Avram have been in Israel before the land there? Possibly. But that could Lot have been there before? Possibly. But 1996, I think I went overtime, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up. But anyway, we know that Sodom and Amorah were founded 52 years before their destruction. 4 of the 5 towns were destroyed 52 years after their founding, which means they were destroyed, and Avram was 99 in 2047. So that means 52 years. One town, Nod, Nun, Olive, 50 plus 1, was founded a year later in 1996, the year of the spot dispersion from Babel, but 1997. So we know that Sodom was founded in 1996. Now it says for 12 years they founded it. Why found it? A place where you're going to have to pay tribute already. Founding a nice city, and you don't want to go to a place where you have moving. If you're going to build a house or start a city, the world was a wide open place pretty much then after the dispersion from Babel. And they had 12 years of relative freedom where they weren't paying taxes. And it was also a Canaanite city. So Canaan, who we talk about, we identify Canaan in the history books, Sargon I, and we identify him with Og, Ogasus, Sargon I, Ogasus, and even Eliezer. So we tie them all together. And there's Chazal. We also reference Chazal, where we find that Eliezer is Og and Eliezer is Canaan. So by logical deduction, Canaan is Og. Okay, and we also find in our research Sargon I. We might actually have some written communication from Noah. It's a little cuneiform. Pretty interesting that we reference in the book. Okay, so 50, Saddam, the 4 towns of Saddam, 4 of the 5 towns founded in 1996, add 12 years, get to 2008, 2 years after the passing of Noah. So by those 2 years were about when Mitzrayim was founded, by Mitzrayim, son of Ham. But, yeah, okay, so 2008, now then the 4 kings came and made them pay tribute for 13 years. So 2008 plus 13, 8, count 8 as one of the years, year 1, 9, 10, I think you probably get to 13 by 1996 plus 12. Anyway, I have it all figured out in the book. You have to look because we're running out of time. Basically, 2018, $1996. All right. I'd have to look in, haven't gone over it in a while. But basically, 2018 was a catalyst for the covenant between the parts. And 430 years from the catalyst for the covenant between the parts. So what was that catalyst? Was the no taxation without representation. The rebellion by the 5 kings of Saddam against the 4 kings. They rebelled for 13 years, weren't paying taxes, and then the 14th year, came down the for 12, okay, here's how it goes. Okay, so they built it in 1996. Then for several years, they were not paying tribute. Then the 4 kings came and they were paying tribute for 12 years. Okay. So when did that tribute end? They stopped paying in 2018, which is 22 years after the founding of Saddam, 2018. So it does work out. 1996 to 2018, 22 years. So about 10 years, they did not pay tribute. They built where they were not subjugated. Okay. After Noah passes on in 2006, so about 10 years after the founding of Saddam, that the 4 kings waited till Noah passed on before subjugating the other, their relatives, because they all didn't want to break Noah's heart, and maybe Noah could have, even in his older age, could have rallied everybody and got a second wind and stomped that out, the 4 kings. So the 4 kings did not start their empire, the subjugation of the others, until Noah passed on in 2006, so shortly after that, which was about the time of the founding of Egypt. He may have been a made man and didn't have to, because he's from Ham, so who I believe is, so related to Nimrod. Then in 2018, which 430 years before the Exodus, 2448, stopped paying tribute. So that was a no taxation without representation. It reminds me of the Boston Tea Party. And the catalyst for the covenant between the parts. So then 13 years not paying tribute. In the 14th year, the 4 kings come down and are defeated by Abraham and Og, the one who escaped. Og, who happens to be Eliezer. If you notice, it's about first time he shows up. Og is Eliezer, is Canaan. Okay, so year 14 of the year count. What year count of the no taxation without representation? Hashem probably liked that, actually, that casting off the abuse of power by the 4 kings, and abuse of power by the sons of the ruling authorities. Hashem doesn't like abuse of power. So keep that in mind when you have power. If you're in a mob, you have kind of power over whoever you're terrorizing. So Hashem doesn't like that. So try not to let that happen. Don't let that. It's easy to fall into that. You know, they say power corrupts. Absolute power. Power can corrupt. Doesn't have to corrupt. Okay, so people who didn't corrupt. They didn't corrupt Moses. Didn't corrupt Samuel. Okay. So why does Rashi? We explain our Rashi, even though he quotes, 70 Brisbane of Psalm, he's not saying that himself, because if you look at Rashi, you can calculate, Rashi could not have held that Abraham was 70. He simply quotes that because for whatever reason, if he did figure it out, he didn't have a chance to write it down. But we show how Rashi also shows that Abraham was well past 75 during the Brisbane of Asarim, was not when Abraham was 70, even though Rashi quotes that view. So at least he has something to work on, and it turns out, there is something to that. Not that Abraham is 70 at the Brisbane of Asarim, but the catalyst for the Brisbane of Asarim was 430. So 430 from that Declaration of Independence year count would be that 430-year span by the Exodus, which is 400 from the birth of Isaac, which is 210 from when Jacob went down. The riddle of the Exodus has some good references in here, has discusses some of the archaeological evidence, and helps make the case that, like we hold, the Exodus was before the end of the 6th dynasty. So the Great Pyramid era was when we were in Egypt. So we also reference Talmud. We were 20% of the workforce. 1/5 of the people who left were Jewish workers, about 600,000 of us, and there's 2.4 million other workers. And so the Exodus epoch was the cause and effect of the end of the Old Kingdom. So James D. Long is very nice. Spoke to him when I was working on the Egyptology. I find the relative dating, a couple of errors in the consensus relative dating in the between the 3rd when Joseph came down. Riddle of the Exodus, James D. Long, Lightcatcher Books. Joseph. Step pyramid at Djoser. We think it may have been a marquee landmark for and grain distribution center for foreigners. Joseph may have already been planning on. Realized his brothers might come down, and that Joseph learned how to do the step pyramid from helping the Matseva for his mother Rebecca, that helped father Jacob with when he buried his mother when he was about 8 or 9. So knew about stone cutting, about stone work. So step pyramid is basically one smaller matzeva stacked on a bigger one underneath. So start with a big matzeva made of stones and then build on that. And that's the first Great Pyramid, 3rd dynasty, Viceroy Joseph. By the end of the 6th dynasty, abrupt end of Egypt with the Exodus events. About 108 years, measure for measure, dark ages of Egypt, intermediate period, and then you get to the Hyksos occupation, measure for measure. It could have been almost the exact same, maybe the same time. And don't forget our slavery, it became more bitter, forced labor, the way they entrapped us, had quotas. It became more bitter later on by Miriam Mar bitter. Me'ir also be for light. So a lot of times, like Isaac Moses gives many examples of etymological opposites in meaning from almost the same, basically the same root. Okay, so Hyksos occupation, about 108 years. Some history books. But now, when did that 108? Did it set in gradually, or did it? But anyway, about 216 years, 108 times 2. So 108 years till Ehud, from the Exodus until Ehud, I believe, it had been Shamgar. That's when I believe the Hyksos occupation started, and then the start of the New Kingdom. Start of the New Kingdom. Not too long into the New Kingdom, well, not that short either, El Amana letter era, so probably a couple, I think it was 400, okay, so here's what we determined. 108 years to the start of the Hyksos occupation, about 108 years after the Exodus. And if you, that start, 108 years, include that in a 400-year span, that gets us to mid-King Solomon by Ramses II. So we determine Ramses II as a father-in-law, one of the key father-in-laws of his wife, the Egyptian princess. Her father was probably Ramses II. And Ramses II we identify as Shishak. Now why do you call him Shishak? Sheh, that's in it. Shin and Kuf. Shin 300, Kuf 100, so 300 plus 100, 300 shin, like 3, like shin, teeth, also shinayim, teeth. Kuf 100, gracious to him. Shin and Kuf 400, so 400 years, there's a 400-year anniversary stele by Ramses II, and that had to when he got the title of Shishak. So that was like mid to late Solomon, we have the exact year. If you add up 108 plus 400 to 2,448, you get the year. We have that in Torah Discovery Chronology. In one of my programs, I think I talked about the 52-year Persian span. Here's a nice book, Yehuda Landi, Purim, coffee table book, Purim and the Persian Empire. Now, Rabbi Landi does a very nice job of what the current consensus, Hellenized consensus is, and also Chazal, and he doesn't try to reconcile them, but he does give some good, it's a very nice, it's a good book to have, but you still need Bible chronology to align everything. And why 52 years is the one historic actuality and not the 208 years from the year after the fall of Babel with the Cyrus proclamation until, which is in 3,390, 7 years after Nebuchadnezzar year 2, until Alexander at River Granicus. So basically 3390 until 3,442. Okay, we also have some good insight on Daniel, on some of the Daniel who untied the knots. He was told, I guess, to keep some of it hidden, just like some of what Jacob was revealing to the sons back in Egypt was hidden. Because Hashem, didn't want to give us all the answers, wanted to give us something to work out on our own. Getting close to the, it seems like we're in the final redemption process, and there, at that time, says the, a lot of Torah is going to come to light. I think Rabbi Cook said the alignment of Torah and science I think Rabbi Cook would be one of the things that will happen by the complete redemption. We always say that wait till Mashiach, Mashiach comes. If we haven't figured out, he'll let us know what the halacha was. So now we have things pretty much worked out. No gaps, internally consistent. We hope you take a look at Torah Discovery Chronology and at the Moshe Emes series, for Torah and Science Alignment. Please enjoy. Hope you enjoyed the programs. Try to like them. Try to subscribe. Try to share them. If you have questions or comments, write in your question or comment. Okay, I'll probably listen, and maybe I probably left out a lot of different segments. For example, El Amana letters, that was mostly by the time of King Saul, during the lifetime of King Saul and Samuel, that was going on. And then a couple years after Samuel passing, and then maybe even a little bit after King Saul passed, a year or two, I think it was about wrapped it up for the El Amana era, and Samson a little bit before it. They seem to be referencing Samson in the El Amana letters. David Rawl has some good work on the El Amana letters, but I think he's still a little bit inflated, even though he uses a revised chronology, but not as tight as Chazal, 5,780 years to date. We also, in Torah Discovered Chronology, we get into the Kohen Gadol, alignment of the Kohen Gadol and the Zugot, the 5 pairs of the Torah Masara, the Torah testimony, unbroken chain of Torah testimony. We get into that. Was it Septuagint, 72 Jewish elders with Ptolemy too. So we actually have that about 15, 16 years different than I think you'd probably find in, Rabbi Victor Miller had it about how we have it. But I think, I don't know if it was Seder Olam, but there was another book where they thought 3,515, but we actually find that that's about when Ptolemy II dies and Ptolemy III takes over, and we find it between 15 and 20 years before that, the main event, which is a translation of the Chumash. Now it could be over that 15-year span that we were doing other books. There was an invitation to come back and do some of the other books of Tanakh, and we could have been doing that during that span, and it ended in 3,515, but it almost certainly began about 15 years to 20 years before that. So we get into that. If you're interested in the Persian kings, Esther, we identify Esther in the history books. We have 6 names, 6 identities of Esther, including in the ones by Chazal and some in the history books, and 6 faces of Darius I. By Chazal in the history books, they have in the inflated Hellenized consensus, they repeat one person, have different names, and they throw some different, assign him different things, and it's one of the reasons they're able to concoct fudge in 156 extra years at that point. So anyway, we have lots of insight. Some of it you probably won't find anywhere else, and some I don't think you'll find it all put together. So some you won't find anywhere else, and I'm almost sure you won't find the way we put it all together anywhere else. So it's good to study. It's free with Kindle Unlimited, 99 cents on Kindle. I like the formatting a lot better with the paperback. I'm not very good at formatting, and the paperback format I believe is better. But if you want to make that investment, and $10 per paperback for each of the Moshe Emes series. You can follow us on Facebook. We have some pages. Torah Discovery page gets more into the chronology aspects. We have reference many works and comment on them. Follow us YouTube, Twitter. Have been it gets a little bit beyond the Moshe Emes series, but you might be interested in following us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, in the business, I can't even pronounce it, LinkedIn, and Quora. Yeah, we have a Torah and science space on Quora you might enjoy. Okay, ResearchGate and academia. All right, so have a good week. We'll do something next week at around 11 a.m. Pacific Coast time. Maybe I'll get into some more details on the Moshe Emes series. On maybe I'll keep going on Torah Discovery Chronology and get into a little bit more detail. Go look at the table of contents. Yeah, go look at the table of contents on Amazon. Use the look inside function, or look at a couple of the papers on academia. All right, I hope you learned something or have something to think about. And don't forget the basics, Chumash with Rashi. Try to do some learning every day. If you can't do Daf Yomi, or if you have time to concentrate, maybe do a little bit more focused EM as opposed to covering territory, with a lot of good Daf Yomi. You can go to ou.org, chabad.org, and dafyomi.org. There are a lot of good Torah online. And obviously it's better to have a chavrusa, try to have a Rebbe. If you don't know, ask your Rebbe. If the Rebbe doesn't know, you should know who to ask. If it's on the Moshe Emes series and you have a question, please ask me. If I haven't got into a point or haven't articulated properly, or maybe I misspoke again and was thinking one thing and I meant another thing. Okay, have a good week. Hope you had a good Shavuos. Try to stay healthy, exercise. Reshis Chachma, Yiras Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the awe of Hashem. It doesn't matter how high your IQ is if you're not building on true principles. You're almost certainly going to end up doing a self-fool and going off on a wild goose chase. So Moshe Emes, Uterasa Emes. Moshe is true and his Torah is true. Hashem alone has 100% perspective. Okay. Yeshakach, be strong, and try your best to keep our respective covenants, 7 Noahide, and if you're a Jewish mother, halakha conversion, covenant of 613. Okay.